centrist Democrats are rallying behind the Biden campaign. The idea of a brokered convention is looking more and more likely. But will their strategy ultimately be successful?
We've got the Super Tuesday morning super panel, Democratic strategist Andrew Feldman and director of media at the Lincoln Network, Marshall Kosloff, two great friends of the show. Good to see you guys.
Haven't checked my phone in a minute. Does anyone else endorse Biden?
Like, who else has endorsed Joe Biden? Andrew, let's start with you. What did you make of the slew of endorsements? You have your finger of the pulse, I think, on both sides of the aisle here. Were you expecting, I guess, the establishment to really get... They marshaled this within 48 hours and brought it out to very high effect. And the polls are absolutely reflecting this. What do you make of this entire situation?
It shows how much the establishment does not want Bernie Sanders. Yeah. I mean, I was, really think that candidates, and Amy Klobuchar or Pete Buttigieg, put their egos aside for what they believe is the best thing for the party. It's a big night for Joe Biden, but I got to tell you, I was watching the night's events, starting with Pete in the Dallas restaurant and moving through the night, and I felt that Joe Biden was a genuine Joe Biden. What people love most about Joe Biden came through. When you compare Bo Biden and Pete Buttigieg, that is real. You saw tears in both the eyes of Mayor Pete and in Joe Biden. They can't fake that. I think there was actual genuine emotion going on, and my wife was actually getting emotional, and she's been critical of Joe Biden throughout this campaign and unsure if she could vote for him. So I think last night was a big night for the Biden campaign.
But Andrew,
no doubt about it.
To play devil's advocate, control room, if we have the sound of Biden not being able to remember the Declaration of Independence, can we please play that? Okay.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
I mean, Marshall, at the same time, that happened on the exact same day, right? So, they've gone all in on a guy who can't really speak. And, I think that's an issue.
But he could win votes. I mean, that's sort of the issue here, which is that his coalition, which is older, it's more suburban, it's more moderate, it's older black voters, he was able to turn them out. And that's what the establishment is having to decide right now. I don't think they're particularly assessing him on his ability to form a coherent stump speech. I think we could probably be seeing less of those coming in. Yeah. But I think the thing that I'm interested in is how this is showing the differences between the 2016 Republican primary and the 2020 Democratic primary, which is that someone on Twitter was saying that this just shows how much everyone hated Ted Cruz. At the end of the day, this is something the Republican establishment could have done just as easily. Yeah. They could have simply said, look, we all know we're literally not going to win. This person who's running against us, Donald Trump, is against our interests as sort of a party, as an establishment. Let's unite behind someone. But they just couldn't pull the lever. And at the end of the day, Biden can't do the sentences, but he's a likable guy.
Can't do the sentences. Yeah. That's true. That is true. Well, and bottom line, he was their last choice. Yeah. Who else? I mean, Bloomberg. They were hoping for Bloomberg. That fell apart. First they pinned their hopes on Pete and Amy and Liz. And we talked about it on the show very quickly. You could see that there was not an affinity with working class voters, no affinity with voters of color. This was just not going to work out. But they got to have their fantasy with those candidates for a while. Yeah. Then, when it became clear to them that those candidates weren't going to work out, then there was Bloomberg. Oh, he can get it done. He's got all the money, and he's this mayor, and he's got this record, and he's bought all these endorsements. And then they saw him on the debate stage. And like, okay, let's hold the phone on that one. And so Biden is the last remaining hope. And they pulled the trigger at the last moment that they possibly could, the day before Super Tuesday, to try to turn this whole thing around. And we're going to see very much tonight how effective that actually was.
Big test for both camps, right? Bernie Sanders, we've had early vote open for 3+ weeks in states.
Right.
Can Bernie Sanders bring people out to vote with an organization? Does he have an organization on the ground that, powers the people, sort of say, right?
Right.
And the question is going to be Latino voters. Can Latino voters turn out for Bernie Sanders the way they did in Nevada, in Texas, in California? It's going to be very interesting tonight, and I'm ready to go.
Marshall, let's expand on something that you said, which is that you said that with the Republicans, they were like, we're going to lose, so we might as well back Cruz and not have Trump. Do you think that it is true? Crystal and I were positive this during my radar, that the Democratic establishment would rather lose to Trump and preserve its infrastructure than take a chance on Bernie? Because ultimately what happened is the guy who the Republicans didn't want to win is the guy who won the election.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting for me here is that who do we mean by the Democratic establishment? There was a good episode of the New York Times' Daily today where they were talking to a voter in Arlington, how he was saying, hey, I'm a center-left Democrat, and honestly, if Bernie's the nominee, I'm afraid of socialism. And you know what? Like, at the end of the day, I don't know whether or not I could pull the trigger for socialism in the fall. So I think it's not just the fact that there are these individual, because I think you're referring to sort of the donor class.
Yes, the donor class.
The reality is that if you're a moderate suburban voter, there's a decent percentage of that base who I think actually would be more comfortable with that too. I mean, that's and I just want to go back to something. I
think that's true. Just on the flip side of that, though, there's a whole lot of young people who are not going to show up for a Joe Biden candidacy. So we always talk about those moderates and are they really going to vote for Bernie Sanders when he's a democratic socialist? Like, are they really going to do that? We never talk about the other side of that equation, which is that Bernie's campaign has inspired a lot of people, young people, working class people, people of color who stayed home last time. Are those people going to show up?
Key difference between Trump and Bernie, though, and sorry, you've talked a lot about this. I don't think Bernie is going to be able to sort of do this sort of crazy bull in the China shop thing that Trump did. Trump in 2016, he literally said, I will not vote or support the nominee multiple times. He said multiple times, I will basically give this election to Hillary Clinton if you guys, the establishment, screw me over. Bernie Sanders is not willing to do that.
He's
so the one thing that I think would probably end up happening is there are voters who would not turn out, but I still think Bernie will campaign for Joe Biden. And he'll do it.
Well, and Andrew, the other side of this that's different from 2016 is in 2016, you didn't have any one Republican figurehead who still had stature and a halo around them in the party. I mean, George W. Bush had been thoroughly discredited. Trump ran explicitly against him. But you have Barack Obama in the Democratic Party, and he still has very high favorabilities, lots of influence. We talked about reporting that says he's been making phone calls and putting out the signal. We know he called Pete after South Carolina, putting out the signal that it's time to line up behind Joe Biden, and they answered the call.
Yeah. Well, pivoting back here to the primary and what we're going to see tonight, because what I'm watching here is we saw in South Carolina, black voters did not step up for Bernie Sanders. He received
young black voters did.
Young black voters, but they stepped up for Joe Biden also. If you look at that chart, so Bernie Sanders got 2 points higher he went up from 14% to 16% in 4 years with black voters in South Carolina. If he does that tonight, that won't cut it. He needs to show he can do better with black voters, because now pivoting to the general, we need black voters for the general election.
Yeah. On the other hand, South Carolina's one state.
Completely agree.
And there's, we talk a lot about the diversity within the Latino community. There's a lot of diversity within the African American community too. California is not the same as South Carolina. And national polls up until, South Carolina at least, had Bernie winning with black voters overall. So it's an important point, but I also don't want to extrapolate from one community in one state to the whole.
Well, that's why I'm watching it. Completely agree with you. I think that if we are just like we do with Latinos or even white voters, if we make generalizations, we're in trouble. But it is something very important to watch, and also to a point about the general election, because to me, one of the issues Hillary Clinton has was we couldn't turn out the black voters in the numbers that we needed to in a Detroit, in a Philadelphia, and even in a Milwaukee.
But that kind of undermines your argument, because she was the candidate of black voters in the primary. It didn't translate.
Right, but they still didn't turn out, right? So but we need. So look, I think there is an issue with Joe Biden's excitement. You look at the split screens last night. You look at the split screens. You look at the split screens last night. One split screen is Ilhan Omar dancing, to power people on and with crowds up the wazoo in St. Paul. The other is a good crowd, a good effort for Joe Biden, but it wasn't so exciting. So we have to see, how. But it was the best day of Joe Biden's campaign by far. He, to me, impressed a lot of people. I got a lot of text messages that had been with Elizabeth Warren, had been with other candidates who were not with Joe Biden anymore, and now they're coming back.
It'll be because of last night. Marshall, who do you think is going to prevail, the Sanders organization grassroots model or the Biden establishment model tonight?
Here's the problem, right? I think it's going to be a wash. I think that everyone's going to sort of have a narrative that so they could. I think Joe recovered enough in South Carolina that he'll be able to last a little longer. Yeah. I think the real question for me is, are we going to see incoherent Joe, or are they going to find a way? And I mean this seriously. Are they going to find a way to present him? Because I don't think anyone doubts like his. People don't doubt his intellect. They don't doubt his ability to literally be president of the United States. But I think what people doubt is his ability to campaign, and they really need to find a way that's better in these shouty, weird sort of like appearances. I don't know how to describe them.
Yeah, well, I mean, people haven't
not letting him speak.
People haven't been going after him because honestly, they've had like pity for him. Like it felt mean to prosecute the case against him because every time he spoke, you're just like, God, where is this going? But Andrew, what is your prediction for tonight? I mean, Marshall says he thinks it'll be a wash. I think that's probably right. You'll have some victories that Bernie can claim, some victories that Joe can claim. But I have to say, at this point, a wash after the establishment has thrown everything at the wall against Bernie Sanders, I think the Sanders people would take that.
Yeah, I mean, the Sanders people need to show that they have a real organization that can win. The way they do that is by winning California, winning Texas. If you win California and Texas by good numbers, it doesn't really matter to me in a narrative if Biden picks up other states. So I think California and Texas are key. He's been up 15 points in the polls in California. Texas, he had good margins. That is really important. I have to bring her up because I know she's a kind of, I don't know if people remember she's looming, but I do. Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren campaign is based around tonight. She had 1,000 plus. Not just Massachusetts. She had 1,000 plus staffers across the country. Her campaign thinks that she's going to come in second in 8 or so states, third in all 14 states, at least third in all 14 states. If she does that, she has her claim that she can ride this out and take this to the convention with delegates and can continue talking about being the unity candidate. If she comes in fourth or fifth in numerous places, it's time to go.
Color me skeptical that that's going to happen. All right. Thank you both, gentlemen.
All right. Stick with us.
Thanks.
More after this.